Hey, what's going on, beautiful Jellyfish? It's Tracy, and today I'm going to be doing a video on modern grinding. I have to say though, before I film this, some of these are, I would say, relevant to Magic Online as well. However, I am not currently testing on Magic Online. That is something that I've been wanting to do for, I don't want to say kind of a while. Like, I've always had that in the back of my head where I'm always like, I'm going to do Magic Online at some point. We just moved from New York to Texas, so it's just been a little crazy, and it's definitely something I have thought about, and really just of some way to get way better. And once I get into that, I will film videos about Magic Online and probably do like videos of me, like, I don't know about streaming, but like filming videos on Magic Online. Let me know if that's something you guys are interested in. But I wanted to do this because I've been practicing Modern like a mad woman. And it's really nice living with someone who plays Magic because then you can just be like, well, let's play Magic. And, you know, I'm very intent on getting better at Magic. That's kind of like my whole thing right now, is just really trying to do that. So, anyways, I've been modern grinding and I wanted to do a video talking about it. So pretty much like what I mean by that, it's like modern grinding is not like, oh, well, you know, I go to FNM and I play like 3 rounds of Modern. Cool, okay, bye. Yeah, no, that's not what I mean. I'm talking like you and your friend or friends are sitting down playing like 30 games of Magic in a row, and you're just going back and forth playing at your games like you're in a tournament, or, you know, all that sort of stuff. So that's pretty much what I mean by that. It's just playing a lot of Magic back to back. When I do this, I don't do sideboard. Now, I know this is something that may be like debatable, like maybe it's something like, obviously, you know, your games are gonna look different when you have sideboard and stuff, but like typically what I find is I'm not someone who goes in usually in sideboards like 10 cards in. That's just not really how it happens. Of course your cards are gonna look different, your deck's gonna look different after your sideboard. It's just not something I usually do. I think it kind of disrupts the flow, I would say, of the games. Like, I'd rather just keep going and not really worry that much about sideboard, but that's like a personal preference type of thing. So the first thing I would really kind of say about grinding a lot of Modern is something that's really important is be aware that when you are doing this with you and your friends, whatever, that you can actually like comment on their lines of play. And if they make like a mistake or like something that you're like, hey, like, I'm just curious, like, why don't you do this instead of this? I think this is like massively important to do, because think about it, in a tournament, even in like FNM, you know, your opponent's not going to be like, oh yeah, by the way, you missed your Planeswalker trigger. Like, no one's gonna say that to you, but like, use that sort of time, like when you're playing with your friends and when you're grinding, to be like, hey dude, like, you missed this trigger, or hey, by the way, why did you Thoughtseize this out of my hand and not this? Like, these are really important things, I would say, to have conversations about when you are playing with your friends. You know, I think that's a really big thing, and like, talk it out, be like, hey, listen, you know, I'm Thoughtseizing you. I'm pretty sure I'm leaning towards this, but like, what do you think? You know, like, again, you're not in a tournament, so feel free to like use your friend and use their knowledge to be like, what do you think is the right line of play here? Okay, cool. The next thing that I would say is grinding really forces you to like get super comfortable with your deck, because you're playing with it so many times in succession that you're just like, you familiarize yourself with the mana base like crazy. Like, I think sometimes people can, like, especially when they're just getting out into a format, they're kind of worried that they may not know their deck as well as they should. But to be honest, that's something that really gets fixed the more times you play a deck, especially if you play it like after each other in like rapid succession, so you just like keep playing consistently. So that's something that I would say is, you know, doing it so much, when you fetch shock, you know every land in your deck. Yeah, that's one thing I would say that's really beneficial of just grinding, is just really getting to know your deck. Kind of on the flip side of that as well, something that it really forces you to do is it gets to know your opponent, like your friend's deck. So say like, you know, right now it's just me and Paul that are pretty much practicing, but in the future, obviously I want to expand that and, you know, have more people that I can like practice with all the time. And, but however, with this, I am now, like, he plays Grixis Death's Shadow, and now I know, like, the ins and out of Death's Shadow. It's super important, like, and I talked about this in a recent video about how, like, yes, obviously it's important to know your deck, but it's really important to know your opponent's decks. Now, listen, I'm not saying that you should be like, I've never seen this deck, like, someone's playing, like, I don't know, like, Infect, and say you're like, I can list all their 60 cards, well, the chances are you're probably not able to do that, because they're probably changing cards up, you know. You may see like a different color maybe not so much with Infect, but you may see a different color combination, so it's just like, you know, you may not sit there and say I can list every single card, but like, you should know what you should know what Death's Shadow does in Modern, you know what I mean, like basic things like that. So it really forces you to get to know that and really see their options and what to look out for. Like, that's so important. Like, when Paul and I play, for example, like, one of the cards that I told him that's really hard for me is Apostle's Blessing. So I'm like, listen, I'm like, that is one of your key cards in the deck. Yeah, you only run 2, but like, that's a card that's like super hard for people to deal with. And whenever I play Death's Shadow now, and that card is actually funny, also used in Infect, where I'm like, right, guys, it's used in Infect, please back me up on that. So now every time I play against that, I'm like, sweet, okay, these are cards that I know I need to look out for, pretty much. So it really forces, it's really good too if your friend, your opponent is playing a deck that's really popular. Like, listen, there's going to be sometimes where they're playing kind of a more fringe deck that you may not see everywhere, but it's good if they're playing a really popular deck. Like, I'm playing Grixis Control, and for Paul that's really viable because, first off, Grixis Control, I mean, it's not as popular amongst the control decks right now. I feel like Blue-White is kind of up there, like Jeskai right now, but playing against Control is like one of those things that's really good to get to know and really well and know like what the lines will play for. So we pretty much know each other's decks inside and out, and it's really beneficial to do that. Some people may find that boring. Personally, I don't. Like, I've been playing, we can literally play 30 games in a row, and like, I don't care. I'm like, I can keep going. Paul's like a little like, yeah, we should stop, and I'm like, nah, let's keep going. Okay, so the next thing I would say is what grinding really forces you to do is to test the consistency of your deck. I have this whole, like, real genuine theory about Modern that I think the best decks are the most consistent decks, or the decks that, like, you either, if you have a deck that, say, like, kills people on turn 3, like, what is the percentage of times that you're consistently doing that? And that's one thing I think that I really enjoy about mid-range and Control, is that it's so much about the late game. So as long as you can like delay the stage of the game, it doesn't happen every time. Sometimes you play Control and you really just get killed on turn 3. It happens. But if you don't, like, the probability of your deck winning goes up because your late game is like so good. Pretty much in like all variations of Control. There's so many bombs in all variations that are really threatening and really scary. So I would say arguably grinding really forces you to test the consistency as how good I would say your deck is. So like, listen, if you're playtesting a deck and you 30 times in the, like, let's just say the number 50, you're playing it for like 50 times in a row and, you know, you win like 70% of times or like something like that. Okay, yeah, that may be a note about how you were drawing, how they were drawing. It could be a note on like, you know, the matchup. Maybe you just have a really good time with that matchup, and sideboard, obviously it will get better because that's how that's supposed to work. But yeah, no, I think that's like a really important thing, and really, it's not something that you play 50 games, you're gonna know how consistent your deck is. It's something like once you play like 50 games in a row over the course of like 100 times, then you're like, okay, cool, I have a really good grasp of how consistent this is and how good of a matchup I'm going to have against this opponent. Though, to be honest, I really, like, in this matchup, for example, like, Death's Shadow versus Grixis Control, I don't know. I mean, listen, again, there's sometimes where, like, he just disrupts my hand and I don't have kill spells, or the kill spells get discarded and I can't do anything, but there are also times where, like, he doesn't draw creatures because Death's Shadow doesn't really run that many creatures, or at least his version. And I just have the late game and I play Keranos and he cannot interact with that card literally at all. So, and I just take the game home. So it just totally depends. Like, I don't really believe the whole, this is a bad match. Not that I don't believe it's a whole bad matchup. Like, it could go realistically either way, because of draws or someone just has all the answers or things like that. So, okay, the next thing, I've been really, really into the whole idea of flex slots. I'm going to do a video on this because I love, like, someone just put that into perfect terms for me, and I'm like, I love the notion of, like, the word use of flex slots in decks. So what do I mean by a flex slot? I pretty much mean, like, I have my Grixis Control list. You will never see me take out 4 Snapcaster Mages. That's a permanent slot in the deck, right? But there are some cards that are questionably, like, flex slots. Like, right now I have a Chandra Flame Caller, is it? The 6-mana one, there's going to be a picture here. Anyways, I'm running her as a 1-of. That may change over time. Right now, I'm really loving her, though. Oh, she blows so many people out. You do when they're tapped out and they have nothing, and you, like, Chandra, and then you just, like, 6 them. Like, it's freaking great. But that's a slot that may potentially, in the future, change, and that's totally fine, and I'm so good with that being a flex slot. So, really, I think what's very important in these games is seeing how those sort of slots in your deck works that you're not 100% sure on. You're going to have cards that you will never change, but there's cards in there, like a couple counter spells that you may be like, I'm not too sure, maybe I'll try this other counter spell. And grinding is the perfect time to change those cards up and to test your flex slots and see, I'm really not feeling this card or whatever. I said this before, but like no deck is permanent, so like you may walk into a tournament and have like one flex slot and you're like, this tournament I'm going to try this card, and I go to another tournament the next weekend and I try this card. Like, I'm all about that life. I think that's super awesome. So that's definitely something I would say is when you're grinding is to totally test those slots out that you're not 100% sure on and know that they can always realistically change and there's nothing wrong with that. Next thing is your mana base. I should have talked about this a little bit earlier because I feel like that would have made sense. But yeah, so if you're, again, grinding so much and you notice that you're never drawing red mana, you need to put more red sources in your deck. You know what I mean? Or you could just run Blood Moon. I mean, listen, it's up to you. With your mana base is, if you play like 5 games in a row and you're like, I haven't drawn a red source every time, okay, yeah, you need to test your deck way more than 5 times to see that. But again, if you're like constantly doing this and you're like, okay, I've played like X amount of games in a row, I have not drawn Arthos, there's clearly not a huge number of them in your deck and you need to change it. So that's one thing too I would say is making sure you're doing these things enough before you settle and say, I hate this card or I can't play with this card. It's like if you consistently draw it and you're like, it's just not working, then maybe take it out pretty much. Okay, so one thing I would also say that grinding really lends itself to is since you're playing so many games in rapid succession after each other, is it really forces you to like look at your hands and say to yourself, okay, is this an example of a good hand? Is this an example of a bad hand? And mulligans are really important. How does your deck mulligan? That is like crazy, crazy important. I'm honestly a firm believer. Like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, like you're obviously, you're not going to do as well if you mull to 5. 5 really good cards are better than 7 meh cards. Let's just kind of get that out there. So I would rather mull to 5 if it means I'm gonna have a better hand. Like if I draw my 7 and I have like super late game cards but I have no early interaction, that may not be the best hand to keep depending on what the situation is and depending on what I'm playing against. If I'm playing against a control mirror, I mean, I know I'm not going to cast Elsbeth anytime soon, so it's like, okay, if I have Elsbeth, you know, I can wait till stages of the game for that. But if I have an Elsbeth in my hand when I'm playing against a deck that's trying to kill me on turn 4, probably not the best card to have in my hand, ultimately, and I have no other ways to interact with the board. That's not super good. So, really testing how you're, and then so then say you go to 6 in that hand, or like whatever the situation is, to really see like, okay, how does my deck mulligan? What is the reason that I'm mulliganing? Is it because I have no lands? I have not the right colors? Okay, well then maybe you're going into a deeper issue of you need to fix your fetches and your shocks and your basics and all those other lands that you're running. So that's what I would ultimately say about that, is really getting hands. And listen, going back to one of my earlier points, I said like, ask your friend, you know what I mean? Like to be like, hey, listen, dude, like I have this hand, what do you think? You know, this card's really sweet to have in the early game, but this is like a late game card. What do you think about that? And what would you do with this hand? So, use your friend to your advantage, you know what I mean? Okay, cool. And, I guess kind of one of the last things I would say is it really, grinding a lot really, I would say, forces you to test and experiment with different lines of play. Now, obviously, we all have the notion in Magic that we want to make the best line of play. However, that sounds like a really easy thing to do, but it's not. And we've all been in situations where we've cast cards and we've been like, was that the right line of play? I don't actually know. I mean, maybe, like, okay, I had an instance where I had Jace the Mind Sculptor on board, and Jace, obviously is a really great Magic card. I don't really think I need to say that. And I was thinking about either brainstorming or upticking him to 5. So some people have the notion, and I may even do a video about this, I haven't decided yet, because I feel like people look at Jace and always think he brainstorms. He does, but he does other things, and brainstorming sometimes isn't always the right line of play, and I feel like a lot of people disagree with that, but in my experience playing with Jace, there's been instances where you physically have to bounce creatures, or you just straight up die, or his uptick is really powerful. It's really good for you, but it's really good to do to your opponents when you really need to see what's going on, what cards they're going to be drawing, or if you can't physically let them have that card, you just pitch it to the bottom. So anyways, I had Jace, and I was thinking about brainstorming, and Paul had like no cards in hand, or like 1 card in his hand or something like that, and I was like, I'm gonna uptick Jace, you know, just to like be on the kind of safe side. I upticked him, he went to 5. I don't remember what I did with that card. He had a lightning bolt in his hand. So he had that lightning bolt for a while because he had no other means of really killing Jace. Like, he didn't have like bolt snap or like anything like that. So the game was totally different. I ended up winning, and Jace had a huge part in that. Now, if I had done the line of play, which was to just 0 him, I would have zeroed, Jace would have died. I may not have won that game. Maybe I would have. I don't really know. But then, you know, later on I did end up zeroing him or upticking him or bouncing, whatever I like decided to do his other moves. So I think that some people get really blindsided in lines of play to be like, there is only one right line of play. And it's like, yes, in some senses I do think that we could all kind of agree with that. Like, not lightning bolting yourself. Maybe that's not really the right situation that you want to do. But ultimately, I think what you find in Control is especially other decks can be a lot more linear. Control is not linear at all. So you know, you have a Snapcaster on board, you can snap so many different things in your graveyard, or you can just hang on to that Snapcaster range for later. Like, that's why I think Control is so difficult, because there are so many different things that you can do, and determining them which is the best line of play is really tough. And again, have those conversations with your friends. Hey, so I know I upticked Jace there. What do you think? Do you think I should have zeroed him there, or like what? And you know, it's hard to determine a lot of times. There can be like 20 lines of play, you know, in a game, and experimenting with some of those. I'm not saying make the worst line of play ever. That's obviously stupid, you know, like don't do that. But really testing the waters, I would say, and you know, seeing what thing is going to be the best is really important. So yeah, guys, that is it. I hope you guys found this video helpful on grinding Modern. Definitely something I'm going to be doing. One thing I would say too for this, and I get that it's not feasible with everyone, but I'm kind of in this thing where I've been keeping track of like me and really forcing myself to practice Modern every single day. Like, that is how intense I'm going right now. Even if it's just goldfishing by myself, or like watching Magic, you know, on my computer, like Star City Games, Channel Fireball, like whatever it is that I'm, you know, that I'm keeping up with. But just really trying to get better at Magic, and that's something I would challenge you if you're someone who's similar to me, or you just want to get way better at the game. I would just do this a lot and try to do this as much as you possibly can. So that is it, guys. I will see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching.